If you're looking to stay informed with the latest analysis on the stories that are shaping our world in the areas of foreign policy, national security, and domestic politics, consider becoming a member of the DSR Network. With the DSR Network podcasts, stay ahead of the curve on global affairs. Each episode across our more than 10 shows features top experts, policymakers, and thought leaders who break down complex issues into digestible, engaging conversations. From breaking news to historical context, we cover the latest topics that matter most. Whether it's the intricacies of international diplomacy, the latest in national security strategies, or the dynamics of U.S. politics, the DSR Network has you covered. Members receive an ad-free listening experience, bonus content for virtually all of our shows, an invitation to join the DSR Slack community, enhanced show notes for select podcasts, and much more. Visit thedsrnetwork.com/buy and enter code July 2024 to receive 50% off the regular membership price for the first year or first month. That's thedsrnetwork.com/buy and code July 2024. Thank you very much for your support.
9, 12, 10, 28, 2, 23.
This is Deep State Radio, coming to you direct from our super secret studio in the third sub-basement of the Ministry of Snark in Washington, D.C., and from other undisclosed locations across America and around the world.
Hello and welcome to DSR. It's Thursday. It's the time that we talk about politics. There's so much to talk about. It didn't really require a lot of imagination on our part to go to the two smartest people that we know about these things. And that is Jen Rubin of the Washington Post and E.J. Dionne of the Washington Post. And for those of you out there who feel that we deserve to give equal time to the New York Times, too bad. Now, there's been a lot going on here. I'm just going to ask you a bunch of rapid-fire questions about parts of it. I think we should start with Joe Biden's remarks last night. One thing that I've learned in the past couple of weeks is I'm never commenting on Joe Biden again. It's just too insane out there in the Twitterverse. You can't say anything. So I'd rather you guys got in trouble. What did you think, Jen?
I thought it was elegant. I thought it was poignant. I thought it was pure Joe Biden. I mean, the love of country, the sense of obligation. When you say he's old-fashioned, I say that in the best possible world and the best possible way. You know, he kind of personifies something we don't have enough of, and that is civic virtue. The sense of public service, the sense of responsibility to our institutions. So I thought it was marvelous. I thought it was poignant. I thought it was sad. And I am so, so grateful he came along at the time he did, that he defeated Donald Trump in 2020 when probably most people could not. I don't want to say no one could because we don't know. And had this incredibly consequential term of office. And then, as he said, passed the baton. So I was very touched with it. I'm a sentimental old fool when it comes to patriotism, so he really got me.
That's very nice. EJ, I know you're a sentimental old fool. What did you think?
Yeah, I'm pretty sentimental old fool. So why didn't I just say I agree with what you said at the beginning and pass, you know? The first and two most important things. Number one, Biden has a heck of a record as president, and by dropping out of this race, paradoxically, he preserved it. He preserved his legacy. Because I felt very strongly, not only after the debate, but even more so after the Stephanopoulos interview, it was quite clear that he was at best going to have a really, 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 really hard time winning re-election. And I think that was clear to a lot of people. And that if Biden had persisted and had run and had lost to Trump, and particularly if he had lost by a big enough margin that the Democrats lost the House and the Senate, that would have wiped out a lot of his legacy, which is very significant. Now, his legacy is preserved and it has a fighting chance of going forward. So that was the first thing. The second thing that I thought was important is his taking the ground that he's going to be president for 6 more months. It's really interesting. After that news conference he gave, after the NATO summit, it really hit me hard that he likes being president a whole lot more than he liked having to campaign for president and having to go every day, have every syllable analyzed, every missed word called out. And that, it just struck me that he'd be much happier trying to find a peace solution in Gaza, pushing for his new initiative on the Supreme Court, which I welcome. The third thing, sadly, is as I was watching that, it was clear he made the right decision because he did not look like somebody who was really ready to fight an election between now and November. He looked like someone who was quite ready to serve 6 months as president and try to do the best he can. And so, in a funny way, I think that, the session last night, on the one hand, underscored he did the right thing. It wasn't easy. He wasn't completely comfortable with it. There was a line in there saying, my record I deserve to be reelected. He didn't quite say it that way, but he said it that way. But it was clear that this was going to be a hard go for him, and it's good that he made the decision he made.
Yeah, no. Yeah, this is moderating 101, that I sort of frame the question and then you get to the way I wanted it to come out, which is I agree with everything both of you have said. It was beautiful. There was civic virtue. It was very graceful. And it was a good thing it happened because I don't think he should have continued on. But let's move on from him. He will be president for 6 more months. Perhaps there will be cause to discuss it again. Well, there's this other thing that's happened this week, and it's the closest thing I've ever seen. I've been in Washington 30-odd years, to a miracle. What has happened around Kamala Harris from 1:46 on Sunday to now, which is like 4 days later, is literally no one, and I've been a big Kamala Harris supporter, could have possibly expected that every single duck would fall into the row, it just as it has, with money, with her potential opponents, with early polling, with her first performances, and so forth. But maybe I'm overstating it, Jen.
No, you're not. There's a school of thought that said, we should have had this, long drawn-out convention and have Democrats fighting. She was really the weakest of the possible candidates. What hooey. What absolute hooey. What you have seen is someone who is exactly right for the moment. Her level of energy, her vivaciousness, her ability to relate in terms of popular culture, her appeal to young people, to diverse audiences, and the speed with which she has changed the entire tone of the election. They are spunky, they are aggressive, they are attacking Trump. She is suddenly drilling down on 2025, something Biden had kind of not really even done all that well. I think when you see her in front of audiences, they fill in the blank for the natural themes. We're not going back, not going back. These kind of spontaneous expressions of excitement. And in some ways, it's the ideal race to run. She didn't have a primary. She has a finite period of time, 100 days or so. She has a ton of money now. She has the structure of the Biden ground game, which was very good. They have a zillion offices, a zillion people, and it's ready to go. It's a turnkey, if you will, turnkey operation. She stepped into it and she's now making the most of it. And the level of excitement and unity among Democrats, it's almost like they're a real party. The seamlessness, the organization, the dedication to, not kind of squabble among themselves, the ability to point everyone in the same direction. Will Rogers would be very disappointed, who famously said that I belong to no party, I'm a Democrat, because this is how grown-up parties behave. This is how they operate. There's a certain ruthlessness, a certain efficiency that we don't usually see from Democrats, and we're seeing it now.
There haven't been a lot of times in the past 35 years that, I've gotten sort of chills or choked up during political moments. There have been a few. I'm a nerd, so I these things move me. When Barack Obama took the oath of office, or he gave that speech after he won, I found that extremely moving. I listened to her today talk to the teachers union and get them raring to go. And it gave me a little bit of chills. And EJ, I thought of you because the theme that she picked for the speech, and a theme that has been the theme of her first video and the theme of sort of the campaign so far, is freedom. And you very often will talk or write about these kind of fundamental principles that should be guiding us in America that often don't. Of course, she shows her political mastery by getting Beyonce to agree to let her use her song "Freedom" as her background music for all of this. A poll just came out minutes ago that showed that Harris is up 20% with young voters over Trump. So, she's definitely plugged into something he'll never plug into. But what have you thought about this theme, freedom, EJ?
Well, first of all, Jen was saying Democrats are behaving amazingly. The cynical part of me wanted to say in the most cynical voice, give the Democrats time. They'll figure out how to do this differently. But so far, what she said is absolutely true. And by the way, I think that the enthusiasm for Harris reflected a relief in the party that they could start over again. And there was a yearning to say, we know we can beat that guy. We watched that convention speech he gave for 93 minutes. If we can't beat that guy, we should find another country. And I think they suddenly felt, with Kamala, we can do this. So that's point one. Point two about her. It's interesting. She didn't run a good campaign when she ran in 2019. But there are times when people step into a particularly challenging situation where they perform better and they rise to the occasion that they're confronted with. And in this first week, she definitely falls into that category. And then to your young people point in freedom, freedom has been a theme that's been important to Democrats now, certainly since the Dobbs decision. But I think before that, with voting rights and the threat of January 6th, I want to shout out my friend Mike Tomasky, the editor of The Republic, who had a great part of his book that was dedicated to reclaiming the idea of freedom, and to Pete Buttigieg, who also made that theme central to his campaign back in 2020. But it's absolutely important because for decades, Democrats allowed Republicans a monopoly on the word freedom, defined in a kind of Reaganite or economic libertarian way. And that gave up way too much ground because, progressives have always been about freedom in two respects, freedom from, but also freedom to, and the ways in which government can empower people through student loans, through assistance at difficult moments, through infrastructure, through job training, that the government can sort of help on the positive side of freedom, but it also guarantees against government oppression and guarantees individual freedom. So that I think she is wise to run on this. I think it's a resonant theme. It is especially important to young people, by the way. And I was really turned on to her appeal to young people during the whole fight about whether Biden would stay on the ticket or not, because our kids call my attention to all this stuff going online and the coconut trees, videos. And there was already an enthusiasm building for her out there saying, let's move on. And she, and if it's moving on to her, that's just fine with us because, look, she can be someone interesting to us as well as somebody who is broadly on the side of where young people stand. On the whole, a very progressive group they are.
Jen, I noticed you nod a couple of times while EJ was talking, so I suspect you have some thoughts on this.
Well, it's interesting. On Tuesday, I was with I don't know how I snuck in, but sort of an all-star group of thinkers, academics, electeds at an anti-autocracy conference at NYU. And the audience was so pumped up. These were a mix politically of moderates, conservatives, but they all turned out because they are concerned with this democracy movement. And I think two things that she really captures. Democracy is a hard word to use because people don't understand what it means. But freedom, they understand. And after sitting through that conference all day long, I then began to kind of look within her speeches and within her messaging. And there's a lot of the fundamentals that are there. It's about having a shared prosperity, which is a big theme of that democracies have to produce. It's a big theme about rule of law and keeping criminals out of government. It's a big thing in democracy to have people who are dedicated to the common good. So a lot of these themes that can be very abstract, you say, like, how are you going to make that argument to people? She's making it in a very positive vernacular way where you can kind of connect the dots, but you can't sell people on a 8-hour conference. You can sell them on the message and the attitude that she personifies. And one other thing that she brings that sadly Biden did not, and I actually noticed it amongst these people who were so relieved, almost giddy by the possibility that they have a chance, and that is joy. You cannot win against autocrats without joy, without a sense of positive hopefulness. There was a referendum in Chile on Pinochet, and the opposition, which was very much hobbled by censorship, by threats of violence, they ran a campaign built around a rainbow, each color standing for one of their constituent groups. And the message, yes, exclamation. And all of their ads were simply sunny, happy people laughing, running in parks, getting together with family. Because if you want to get people engaged, you can't simply scare them. You can't simply say, well, this bad thing is going to happen. You have to say, don't you want joy in your life? Don't you want to be free? Don't you want to have an America that you can be proud of? So that sense of joy, that effervescence, which comes very naturally to her because she is a charismatic person, because she is very enthusiastic, really, I think, is a nice pairing with the message that we can make very wonky and write a lot of columns on, but she can make very accessible, but also the attitude, the tone. We're the future, they're the past. We're for possibilities. We're for opportunity. So I just thought it was an interesting match as I was sitting amongst all these kind of pointy-headed people, including myself, talking about these issues, and then to watch her, even things on an issue-by-issue basis, the court, abortion. There is no one better in the Democratic Party over the last year and a half on Dobbs than she has been. And she's been talking about freedom. So I think there's a lot of positive things going on. But listen, Democrats have just dug themselves out of a hole. They're not like leading yet. So this is the beginning. This is, we're the end of the beginning, to quote Churchill, and we got a long way to go.
Yeah, by the way, those of you who are out there listening who might by any chance subscribe to or read my Substack, I wrote it before Jen said this. I am not plagiarizing her. We just came to this view about joy and exuberance independently of one another. Probably, I'd like to think because it's true. Now, EJ...
Could I just jump on that for a sec? First, you are joyous people, and that comes out in everything you do. But I want to underscore a couple of points Jen made, including, by the way, at the end, this ain't over yet. And the first week should not delude anyone into thinking this will be an easy campaign. That's important, and we'll probably get there. But I think that you suddenly have the age issue completely turned around in this campaign. There is only one candidate now who is the oldest nominee in history, and that's Donald Trump. And I think that all of the attention that's been given to Joe Biden's problems because of his age will now call forth a demand to say, let's subject Donald Trump to some of the same inquiry and take a look at, where is he on this? Second, Jen was absolutely right to mention future versus past. That is typically a very, very successful message from moderate to progressive candidates. And Harris can make that. I had thought for a long time Biden could make an argument, I may be old, but my policies are about the future, not his. It's way easier for someone to make that argument who is not so old and can say, this really is a future past dynamic. The last thing on Harris's affect, I think the Republicans are going to regret making her laughing a negative and to call attention to it. Because at this point in our history, given how difficult and dispiriting politics has been, I think a lot of people are in the mood for laughing a little bit. And I am very anxious to see how she plays with that on social media, because I think attacking a candidate for laughing is just not a good strategy.
And also, if you notice, Donald Trump never laughs. He never laughs. He makes jibes. He thinks he's being clever, but he does not laugh. And, I think you contrast a mean old guy who's basically screaming at people to get off his lawn with this young, effervescent, modern woman. And by the way, the other dumb thing is attacking blended families. Oh my gosh, how stupid is that? How many Americans live in blended families? How many women don't have children? The same women, by the way, who are struggling with IVF that Republicans want to take away. So some of the responses on the Republican side have been so monumentally stupid that, you have to be lucky to have the right opponents. And in this case, boy, does she. These people are just like serving up one softball after another for her to hit out of the park.
It's not a good look for a party when the headline in Politico is something like Republican leaders tell their people not to use racist themes against Harris. That's not a good day for your party.
No, it's true. And also coming out against cats. I mean,
yes,
it's got to. There's a lot. That's half of America likes the cats. So one of the things, though, that a lot of people are saying here is, well, Kamala only has a few days to define herself. She's got upside because she hasn't been defined. People can, sort of impose ideas on her of who she is. Does that mean anything, Jen? And how should she define herself?
Well, I think she is defining herself. I think that's exactly what she's doing. She's come across as someone who is tough. She's the prosecutor versus the felon, so she's not going to give up on the crime issue. She is running on someone who embraces a vision of America that's inclusive, that's forward-leaning, and that's based on freedom. That, I think, is her definition. That's kind of what she is doing. And she is defining herself as someone who kind of takes no prisoners, takes no guff, is very much an exemplar of who Americans are. And I think, the "we're not going back" is the most defiant, most succinct way of putting this. And I think her ability to zero in on the 2025 project, we've heard more about the 2025 project in 4 days than we did in the last 4 months from the Biden campaign. So I think she is defining herself. I don't know what else people want, in terms of definition. And frankly, the other side is defining her. Okay, so she's someone who's in a blended family who laughs. Okay. And your point, she is someone who's been outspoken on abortion. Okay. All right. But she is also embracing her prosecutorial background. And I think that helps because Democrats are always accused of being soft on crime. She can tout the fact that crime is near a 50-year low under this president. And it's also going to be interesting to see who she chooses as a vice president. The Republicans talk about DEI well, finally there's white male DEI, because those are apparently the only people who are qualified to be our president. So send us a white male, please, so preferably someone from the Midwest. But we also forget that's an advantage. She has another opportunity to kind of define who she is and what they're about. It kind of reminds me of the Bill Clinton moment when he chose Al Gore, and that doubled down on this brand of the New South, of these outward, confident, inclusive young Southerners. And she has the opportunity. I think there are a lot of people of her age, 50s to, early 60s, who can double down on this message of productive, good government, no nonsense, confident leaders. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see who she chooses. And that's another source of excitement and interest. Gosh, you get to choose one of these really impressive people, bring them off the bench and put them on the national stage too. I think there's an advantage to that. And frankly, every single person that has been named, they're all good. And they're miles better than J.D. Vance. My goodness.
Yeah, no, well, there's no question. J.D. Vance is a terrible choice. And EJ, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this particular search.
I'd like to answer your original question if I could, because I actually think that her defining herself now is very important, because Republicans are really prepared to throw a lot of stuff at her. I got an email from a Republican friend who is not in any way a Trumpist, but listed the weaknesses he saw that could be thrown at Kamala Harris. She ran for president in 2020 at a moment when all of the pressure on candidates was to move to the left. And they didn't all move to the left. Joe Biden didn't move to the left. But where it was hard for her to use her tough prosecutor language and background in the context that was defined by the Black Lives Matter movement and the completely justified reaction to the shooting of innocent people by the police. But it really, so there were a lot of statements back there the Republicans want to use. They're going to use immigration. They're going to continue to use immigration about her. And she can argue, hey, I wasn't in charge of immigration. I was trying to get work with Latin American countries. And guess what? We're much better off now because Mexico is actually acting on its side of the border that has helped us reduce the flow to the border. She can make those arguments, but they can tie her where they want to the aspects of the Biden administration that they want to attack. And when you are a United States Senator, you have a long record of statements and a voting record. And they're already out there using some rating that shows that she is more liberal than Bernie Sanders, they're saying. Sanders did her an enormous service on CNN last night, saying that's another Trump lie. No, she's not more liberal than I am. But I think I think she and her campaign are very realistic about this. I think they know that a lot of stuff is going to be thrown at them. But that is why it's important that she come out early. Mitt Romney, and Jen remembers this well, was really defined by the Obama campaign very early on as a heartless rich guy who didn't care about the workers affected by moves that he might have made as an investment person on their livelihoods. And they were in this they and a super PAC ran this amazing series of attacks early. And I don't think Romney ever recovered from that. And I think that's where this idea that she's got to define herself before this onslaught comes at her is really important. She's had a heck of a start, as Jen said, but I think they're going to have to figure out how they're going to move on a lot of these issues to play enough defense so they can play mostly offense.
Yeah, I think that's true. Frankly, having had some conversations with them, I have a sense that they know how they're going to respond on immigration. They know how they're going to respond on a bunch of these issues. And I think that's, I think she will be successful at that. I would like to come back to the vice president thing for a moment. We've just got a few minutes here. And I'll go back to you, Jen, and then EJ. But you talked about Gore and Clinton. And to me, that was the most consequential vice presidential pick of my adult lifetime, because It said, this is next generation leadership. And it just said, these guys are very different from George H.W. Bush. And I think it helped them win the election. But what it was there was a narrative. It wasn't ticket balancing. It wasn't some political calculus. And there are some people who are on this list who have very strong narratives. If you pick Gretchen Whitmer, you've got two women. That's interesting. If you pick Pete Buttigieg, she's a gay guy, and he's in this new kind of family, and he's also the best guy to refute Trump on Fox that there is. Mark Kelly's an astronaut. There's some people who've got a good story. Roy Cooper, to me, maybe he's a great governor, but he looks super bland. And Andy Beshear looks like younger Roy Cooper, and Tim Walz, I don't think he's older than Roy Cooper, but he looks like older Roy Cooper. To me, those guys are kind of neutral. Josh Shapiro, the first Jewish vice president, maybe, and Pennsylvania, maybe there's a story there. But the question is, do you agree that going with the narrative, doubling down on saying we're different somehow, is a more important distinction than balancing?
Well, I think we've kind of passed the era, maybe with the exception of Pennsylvania, when a vice president can bring a state. The last VP who did that was probably Lyndon Johnson, who brought Texas with him. So I think you can have someone, however, that either reassures or that magnifies. And sometimes you get lucky, you can have someone who does both. I think it's interesting you should mention Mark Kelly. I think he kind of does both. On one hand, he kind of gives a certain masculinity, a robustness to the fight. On the other hand, he is almost exactly her age. He has been on the forefront of the gunfight because he is married to Gabby Giffords. He is strong with Hispanics. He is a really kind of a no-nonsense kind of politician, speaks well. So he is someone who could both give her a little bit of thematic, balance. He's from the West. He's has a lot of Hispanic constituents. He's been very strong on immigration, and at the same time, kind of magnify this next generation kind of new image.
I should add, he's also married to somebody Jewish.
Exactly.
Both people would be married to somebody Jewish.
Exactly. And the only one better would be Josh Shapiro. And in that case, Kamala would be the only non-Jew among the four of them. So let the 1,000 conspiracies bloom. I would take just one exception with something, and that is Andy Beshear. I didn't know much about him. And I was at one of these endless conferences and spent some time with him one-on-one, saw him in a small room, saw him in a large room. He is very good. And when you're talking about kind of reassurance, he talks, first of all, he's been able to govern as a Democrat in a red state. And so I think he can talk to many of those rural voters. You don't have to win those. You just have to reduce the margins in some of those areas. So he doesn't bring a state, but he is young. He's governed extremely well. He is very funny. He's very quick on his feet. And he's a good response to the Republicans' claim to, have rural America. He basically says, you don't know a damn thing about rural America and quit running my people down.
Yeah, he's also really good on J.D. Vance because of J.D. Vance's whole Appalachia thing. And Andy Beshear, I'll just want my last point, EJ, before you step in. And Andy Beshear is 46, which is it. So he's 13 years younger than Kamala Harris. So that makes something too. EJ.
I went down to Kentucky right before the governor's race to write about Andy Beshear because I thought he was a really important figure and I thought he was going to win. And I interviewed him. I went to a couple of campaign stops. He is really good. He is really impressive and could make a case. And I also want to speak up for Tim Walz for a moment because I think he coined in an interview, I think it was on CNN, the way in which people really should talk about this far right. He didn't sort of use the word fascist. He didn't use any of these highfalutin words. He simply said, these guys are just weird. And I really think that is a key to this door. to say, wait a minute, step back, forget all whatever highfalutin words you want to use. Listen to them carefully. They are saying really weird things. And so I salute him for that. On the other hand, I'm very old-fashioned on these things. I don't think it's going to be Bashir because there's no chance the Democrats carry Kentucky. I don't think it'll be Tim Walz because if the Democrats are really struggling to carry Minnesota, they got really big problems. And I do think that I think there's a lot to be said for Cooper and putting North Carolina into play for real. And I think he's an impressive guy. Similarly, Shapiro, who is also great. When I interviewed him, he told me how much he hated my Boston Celtics. And I love that for both good briefing, because he knew how much of a Celtics fan I was, and it proved he was an authentic Sixers fan. But he is really a quite extraordinary politician. And I think the three will come down to Cooper, Kelly, and the Kelly story is fantastic, or Shapiro. And one last point, the Financial Times had this very interesting paragraph, I think it was yesterday, where it said that Wall Street donors are for Cooper or Shapiro, but Hollywood donors are for Kelly. And I think Hollywood donors understand the joyful storyline of astronauts and conquering space. And I think that's really going to be part of why Kelly is picked, as well as the story he can tell on guns, as well as the story he can tell on the border. But I love that particular split in the Democratic Party.
I would just say one thing about Cooper. I love him. He looks and he is a little bit older. So to the extent to which you want to make a really vivid contrast generationally, he doesn't quite help. He's only 67. It's not like he's some, old guy. But the difference in kind of appearance and vibe between Shapiro and Cooper is very strong.
I think that's true. And if he's not picked, that will probably be one of the reasons.
Totally agree with you guys. So great to talk to you. It's so many fascinating things happening all at once. It really helps to have folks like you help us make sense of it. So we are grateful. And thank you, EJ, and thank you, Jen, and thank you, everybody, for listening. And obviously, for the next 103 or whatever days there are, we will be talking about this nonstop. So join us here again. Until then,
a joy to be with you both to pick up on the theme that you so correctly underscored.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Likewise. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.